Thresholds Radio with your host, John Stevenson.
According to UFO activists.
And they're in the darkness, on the ground, knocking on the walls. Something crawling. It's obvious that she had been stabbed.
Why?
I'm like, oh my God, are you seeing this?
And what the evidence
To
is.
a formation forming.
You're listening to Thresholds Radio. On tonight's show, we have Daniel Stockin. We're going to be talking with him about the fluoride cover-up, that and much more on Thresholds Radio. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
TheEdgeOnAir.com wants to invite you to be abducted. Tune in Friday night starting at 10 p.m. for Thresholds Radio. Host John Stevenson is your guide through the realm of the paranormal with an hour-long radio show sure to give you the heebie-jeebies. Check out UFO-info.com to learn more. It's Thresholds Radio every Friday night at 10 p.m. on TheEdgeOnAir.com.
Welcome back. Back with us today, talking about the real dangers of water fluoridation, is my good friend Daniel Stockin from the Lillie Center for Scientific Research and Development. How you doing today, Daniel?
Hey, I'm just doing well. Great to be here again, and looking forward to our discussion.
Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what your organization is for people that might have missed you on the last show, which I believe was in January.
Yes, I'm a public health professional. My background, I'm one of those guys that used to put the white suit on and dive into spills of radioactive materials and biologic agents. I'm the former manager of the EPA Western Regional Lead Training Center, and I've been involved in toxics assessment, hazmat, those kind of things. And over the past 8 years, maybe a little bit more than that, I've been working almost full-time, up until relatively recently, on this issue of harm from water fluoridation. So this is something that, for me, as a person who's been involved with assessing hazards, when I got pulled into it, I really didn't know what I was getting into because I'm not a politician. I'm kind of one of these nerdy scientist guys. But I quickly found out that the issue about harm from fluorides and water fluoridation really didn't have anything to do with science. We already have plenty of science that would have caused the whole practice to end. This is the reason that it continues today. Really is not about science. It's about people who got invested in this and what it will mean when it collapses and what the financial and legal liabilities are.
Well, the word's really getting out about this. Like, since we had you on last time, I was telling you off air, we got quite a bit of response from that. And I can see the Google hits, too, people searching your name and searching water fluoridation. So the word is definitely getting out there. Yes, it is. And a fascinating thing to me, we began to talk about the whole issue of Fluoride Gate, the Fluoride Gate scandal relating to this issue a few years back, and now it's starting to accelerate as more and more Freedom of Information Act information is coming out, and people are finding out that there's some really kind of disturbing aspects to this issue of fluoride. This for me, I've worked with a lot of dangerous things in my career, and when you can protect yourself, I could have never done my job if I was really worried about working with chemicals, and I always just knew how to protect myself. The disturbing aspect about this for me is you can't protect yourself when you're working with fluorides in water, and then also it's into the foods that are processed or made with the fluoridated water. So there's this effect, this kind of spillover effect, and of course people get fluoride from a whole bunch of other sources. So to me, this violates the real fundamental principles of toxicology and things like this, where we can't control dose, things, very fundamental things like that. And so a lot of people, when they hear the word fluoride, they mix it up with the word chlorine. They don't really kind of understand, and I understand why. I mean, these chemical names, a lot of people's eyes would roll back in their heads when they hear these heavy-duty chemical-sounding names. But to forget all of that and just sort of distill it for what the average person who's not a scientist, and you really don't have to be a scientist to understand. There's some real common sense issues about this that make no sense to me. On a common sense basis, but then also on a health basis and a toxicology basis. And so as we began to look into this whole issue a few years back, I began to find this kind of strange reaction in people, and we found out that professionals, I'm talking about doctors, dentists, researchers, scientists, and of course, even logically also the political leaders,
a lot of people have never really looked at this issue, and I'm talking about the doctors, and I found them making really fundamental errors in their assumptions, and we traced it back to the fact that there was basically a few talking points about fluorides and water fluoridation that have been basically disseminated throughout the public health infrastructure. So I guess maybe I always like to share this at the beginning, is that we put fluorides in water to help prevent cavities. That's really why we add these fluoride chemicals. It's the only chemical that we add to drinking water at water treatment plants that treats a condition in people's bodies. All the other stuff that they add to the water at treatment plants, it treats the water itself.
Right.
For instance, we add chlorine to kill germs in the water. We add aluminum compounds to take dirt out of the water. But these compounds, these fluoride chemicals, we're adding to actually create physiological effect in the human body. So we're being medicated in the drinking water, and I have some real heartburn with that aspect.
And that other thing you're talking about was something last time I talked to you, I didn't know until you had mentioned it, is that this is in everything. This is in bread. This is in products we buy because of the water they make it with, which for some reason, I never even realized that until you said it. So that's really scary because you're getting it not only from water, but you're getting it from your food. You're getting it from everywhere.
Yes, we are. And it's something that I call multiple source overdosing. And that's one of the fundamental tenets of pharmacology and toxicology, is that you want customized dose. When you go to the doctor and he gives you a pill, it has to do with your body weight and your other sources of exposures. These things have to be factored into how much of this active agent that you're ingesting. But to me, I get a lot of people actually. We do this when I give presentations. People call up and they ask if we'll do a presentation here or there. And one of the things I do is a little show and tell. And I have gone to grocery stores and I bring an assortment of various kinds of foods and beverages and other products that people will be ingesting. And I display it, and the media is really fascinated with that also, because it's something they can zoom in on and very sort of graspable. When you look at a thing like a can of corn or Raisin Bran or bread or beans, baked like refried beans, things like this that you buy in packages and cans and things like this, jams that may have a fluoride pesticide residue in the grapes, things like this. And so there's been this is one of the reasons why in 2011 the Centers for Disease Control and the Health and Human Services folks, they recommended slightly dropping the amount of fluoride in fluoridated water to 0.7 parts per million instead of a range of 0.7 to 1.2 parts per million. That sounds all kind of techie, and the bottom line is that they dropped it basically a little bit. And the thing that was fascinating about it is they did this after protesting for decades that there was absolutely, positively no science whatsoever that would justify lowering fluoride in water. So when they did do it, they said as their justification the thing that you just mentioned, which was that, there's a lot of sources of fluoride now, so this is why we're doing a fine-tuning, they said. But to me, that to me is very disingenuous, because even if you lower it a little bit, which they have recommended lowering it a little bit, you still can't control the dose that people ingest.
Exactly. Somebody might like a particular bread or a particular product that has a lot in it and eat a lot of it, and they have no way of knowing how much you have.
No, and it's not on labels of food. It's not required to be labeled, things like this. And so people are kind of stunned by that aspect of it. And in a very practical sense, for people who are the most vulnerable populations, for instance, if you're a kidney patient or a diabetic, these are really critical things to know about, or if you have a little baby. And on the other end of the scale, if you happen to be a senior citizen and you have joint pain or stiffness, this is something, to be aware of, that fluorides are accumulating in your bones and joints. Also, to me, this is very greatly disturbing that fluorides, because they deposit in your bones, that's where your immune cells, many of your immune cells are generated in your bones. And I have found virtually no knowledge about this issue in the populations of people who are immunocompromised. It could be someone who has a kidney transplant, and they're having to take drugs, to make sure they don't get rejected and their kidney doesn't get rejected. And there are people with all kinds of immunosuppressive diseases. And to me, I think that, I'm not a doctor, I don't pretend to be, I'm a public health person, but I mean, I think that people at least should be given the information about this so that they would have a choice if they are immunocompromised to be able to avoid it if they wanted to.
Right. It's actually kind of easy to cut down a little bit. Like since we talked to you, I was telling you before off air, I got that new toothpaste now that has no fluoride in it, and it's not hard to find. My gosh, you can go to the local Walmart and get it. So little things like that can certainly help too.
Yes, absolutely. There's definitely ways now. I get that question a lot, actually. People, until fluoridation collapses, and we can talk about that that's really kind of encouraging as we're moving towards the collapse. But until it collapses, there are certain things that are kind of, from my opinion, would be to sort of prudent to do to limit your exposure to fluorides. And it's important on several levels. There's the fluorides themselves, but remember also that fluorides can potentiate harm from other exposures. So it's not just the fact that fluorides can be harmful in and of themselves, but if you're also exposed to lead or other aluminum sources and things like this is something to educate oneself about. And then the next question is, well, how do I not get it in my food, and how do I not get it in my water? And, that's something we can talk about if you'd like to.
Yeah, actually, why don't you go into that now? Because like you said, I've talked to you. I've tried to cut it down. I actually even make my own bread now, believe it or not, trying to stay healthy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I think that there's a kind of a wide spectrum as to how you can do this. I have some people, for instance, you'll find this, I don't know if I had mentioned this before, but some people that want to get a filtration system to filter it out of their house's water. And so you've got the issue of, do I put it on my sink to deal with what I drink, but what about the whole house, like when I'm showering? And what do I deal with the whole house effect of the fluoride being there? And kind of a disturbing aspect of this is that one of the more effective ways that the systems are out there, if you want to filter the fluoride out of your whole house water, they've got these systems that use bone char. They basically take cow bones or other animal bones, and you run the fluoride past it, and interestingly enough, the fluoride will be pulled out of the water by the bones. And, of course, logical thing that follows from that is, wait a minute, if they use animal bones to take fluoride out of water, doesn't that mean my bones are going to absorb it?
Exactly. That's kind of a chilling thought.
It's very kind of it's almost, some people tell me it's kind of creepy to think of running their drinking water past cow bones and things like this. But the fact of the matter is that it is pretty effective. There's other methods, like distillation systems, which take basically everything but hydrogen and oxygen out of the water. There's a few things they let go in there also, but there's the whole idea of filtration of the fluoride, and the thing that the first thing to remember is a lot of people have those carbon or charcoal filters on their house, or on their refrigerator, let's say, or on those, those ones that sit on your sink, your countertop, and you pour your water through it.
Right.
Like a pitcher. A lot of those, the ones I've come across, those are charcoal or carbon-based systems, and that doesn't touch the fluoride atom. It doesn't touch the fluoride ion. And so the fluoride compounds, because it's a real soup inside your water, you've got fluoride bound with this, fluoride bound with that, and it's just kind of an interesting sort of chemistry inside in the water. But as you're trying to take the fluoride out, you can use some reverse osmosis systems, for instance, but some of them take as little as half of the fluoride out, or maybe even 45% of it. Some of them will take like 96% of it out. And then you've got other ways where, these charcoal ones, of course, don't touch fluoride. It's a very hard animal to grab a hold of, if you will. And so there's a series of things that if you can afford it, and we don't endorse any one particular system or anything like that. We're just a nonprofit organization, and we don't take sides and things like that. But there are toothpastes, there are water filtration systems that can help lower your fluoride dose that you're getting. And, of course, then there's your food. And I just encourage people to eat as much non-processed food as they can, bearing in mind that some produce has a fluoride pesticide residue on it. Even some of the there's a whole series of sort of fumigants. There's a fumigant that the EPA has said that they want to phase out It's a fluoride one that actually has pretty high levels on certain foods. But the industry, of course, for certain grains and other things like this, they're using this fumigant, and they're not real happy about discontinuing it because they started using the fluoride one in place of some other bad actors, if you will. So the best thing that I would say is to use fluoride in to the degree that you can, to use fluoride-free foods from not having processed water used in the manufacture of those foods.
Right.
So I mean, there's you can get you make your own bread, but there's other kinds of foods that what are you going to do if you happen to like Raisin Bran? It's kind of tough to make your own Raisin Bran where you get the fluoride on the raisins as a residue on the raisins, and then you also get it in the water that manufactures the bran flakes.
That's true. It's not just fluoride, too. Just in general, for health purposes, you should eat organic and you should do more things yourself just because of all the other crap that's in there, too.
Well, I mean, it's a very sobering thing for me because of the way when fluorides get in your body, there's the way I sort of say it, it's kind of like the big gorilla on the block. Fluorides kind of throw their weight around. It's the way they're electrochemically set up, and so when they get in our body, this is why I'm concerned on a lot of levels, because there's so many susceptible subgroups who are even more, I guess, if you will, susceptible than other groups of the population. So, I have said for some time that what we need to do is educate folks so that the next time you hear the word fluoride, your reaction to it will be the same reaction you have when someone says the word arsenic. You know how you recoil when you hear the word arsenic? Right. Well, the idea here is that for one-time kind of sudden exposures, not long-term chronic ones, the toxicity of fluorides are just a whisker less toxic than arsenic and a little bit more toxic than lead. So just to put that in perspective, it sits right in between those two. So, if we think that fluoride is some innocuous kind of thing, the way that it's painted by the pro-fluoride and fluoridation folks, that's just not true.
Well, some people, too, are their eyes are open and they realize it. And then there's other people, like I was telling you last night on the phone, on our Facebook page, somebody had mentioned that. And people are like, yes, I've heard that's bad, and I recommended they listen to you. And then some other people post like, oh, that's fine. I've been having it my whole life. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. And they're just dead set and won't even listen.
No, I think there's an issue for me that I found. I didn't know this when I got into it. My father he was a psychologist, and I grew up learning a lot about the psychology of how we defend what our beliefs are and what makes people open-minded and closed-minded, et cetera. It just really made me do a lot of thinking along those lines. And I find that this issue is terrifying on a conscious or usually subconscious level for most people. Because if it's true, and it is, that something this harmful has been missed for this long by the very people that we trust for our health, to watch over our health, then this is very difficult for people's worldview to assimilate. So that's, to me, I see that people who so strenuously, particularly those in the dental field, if your whole career you've been pushing fluoride, the first thing, either subconsciously or consciously, you think is, what's my liability if I've been pushing this stuff?
Yeah, that's true.
Even doctors, of course, are that way. But beyond that, there's a lot of folks who really want to trust their doctor. And the thing that most people don't know is that doctors haven't looked at fluoride. I have found very few that have read the most recent scientific literature, and just they think that fluoride has been scientifically studied exhaustively. And even the Centers for Disease Control has pushed that. So we found out, of course, from the National Research Council that exact opposite is true. Really basic, fundamental research on whole body outside the mouth effects have never been studied.
Well, aren't there? There's quite a few countries that have outlawed this already too. That they are not even allowed to use it, aren't there?
Well, I want to be accurate about how we state that. There's a lot to sort of learn about this whole topic, but it is true that there's plenty of countries that don't fluoridate their water. The other side, the pro-fluoridation folks, they like to say, well, a lot of those European countries, they don't fluoridate, but they put fluoride in their salt, kind of like, how we add iodine to our salt.
Yes.
And they act as if that's a form of fluoridation through salt and other things that would make up for it. But what they don't bother telling you is that a number of countries that have no salt fluoridation or water fluoridation have tooth decay rates as good or better than us. So there are plenty of countries and cities, major ones now, you keep hearing more with more frequency, are getting away from fluoridation. And frankly, I think as a ratepayer, any of your listeners who are ratepayers for their water that they get delivered to their home, this is something that is going to affect people's water rates when the legal actions begin in earnest. Now, they have begun, but just to think of it as a risk management and a financial and legal risk management concept, from a water utility standpoint, everything that they do to support fluoridation should be weighed, the benefit of it, which is really very limited in terms of cavity prevention, needs to be weighed against all the other negatives. And it's kind of strange how the other side basically acts like there's really no downside, as if this is the only chemical on the planet that you can drink as much as ingest as much as you want, and there's no downside to it. Makes absolutely no sense.
This is absorbed through the skin, too. I mean, like if you take a shower in it, it's absorbed through your whole body. It doesn't just have to be in your mouth, right? Yes,
and that's kind of a sobering thing also. There's been virtually no science on that to really look into it, but yes, it is absorbed dermally. And so, that's why people sometimes are concerned about getting whole house filtration systems because of the showering angle. I drink water from a 500-foot well, and, I feel very fortunate in that respect. But there's a lot of people that still have this coming into their showers. And, for me, if you look at all the different sources where it comes from your toothpaste, your foods, your water, your other beverages, other oral health products, and various things like this, the fact that you have apps, you can ask, you could go to your doctor today and say, how much fluoride did I ingest last month? They would have absolutely no idea. You would say, how much is in my bones right now? To where, how far along am I right now towards getting skeletal fluorosis, very painful and deforming. And the science behind doing that is just we're not there. You can't do a bone biopsy, very, very painful. And so what we've done is we've looked at some cadavers and things like that. But the fact is that everyone listening to this right now, if you think about your bones and joints, you have fluorides that have accumulated over your lifetime in your bones and joints. The only question is, how far along are you to the point where you may, at some point, start getting the early painful stages of skeletal fluorosis? And that, of course, the other side likes to say, oh, there's never really been found skeletal fluorosis, but, of course, they forget to tell you that we don't look for it.
Sure. That's kind of troubling.
Yes, I mean, the symptoms mimic those of rheumatoid and osteoarthritis, and so, the fact is you have thousands of parts per million of fluoride in your bones right now. What is that doing to your immune cells that are being generated in your bones? How could it be that if you have joint pain or stiffness as a senior citizen, that maybe some of it was caused by this? And if you are a kidney patient, you're really in a tight spot because it's this vicious cycle. Kidney patients, their kidneys, a lot of them are compromised to where they can't excrete fluorides. When that's the place where your body really tries to get rid of them, we concentrate fluorides there in the kidneys as your body desperately tries to expel them. So you get this 50-fold increase that's occurring there down in the kidneys, and so if your kidney function isn't there to the degree that it should be, is if you're impaired somehow, or you maybe have a kidney transplant, or you're missing a kidney, or something like that, then what's happening is your body's able to get rid of less of it, so more of it deposits in your bones. And certain kidney patients have this thing called osteomalacia, which is a very painful bone syndrome. And so all these fluorides are accumulating in their bones, even more so. So as you age, if your kidney function drops, and I think it's something like 1 in 9 American adults have some form of kidney disease now. Mm-hmm. So this is just very, very concerning to me, and all of this has to be weighed against a very minimal amount of cavity reduction from fluorides.
Well, and there's no actual way to tell how much is in your system. If somebody went in and wanted to know how much fluoride they've ingested or is in their bones, you really can't tell then, huh?
No, the science, there's a couple phases that we're going to be entering in. They'll overlap a little bit, but I see this thing shaking down in 3 phases. First is the collapse of fluoridation. Secondly, there's going to be a whole bunch of research and grant money and things like this on how to analyze the body burden of fluorides that are already deposited in people's bodies. For instance, up in your pineal gland, in your brain, where it accumulates, or in your bones. How do we know who's got it bad and what level? And then beyond that will be the research that has to be done to how do you pull it out of the body once it's there without harming the other structures, other systems and organs. So, we haven't even finished the first stage, which is collapsing fluoridation, but there's going to be quite a bit of money I see spent on this as it unfolds.
That's true, and I never thought about that. There's no way to actually take this out of your system right now, is there? If you have it in there, I mean, we don't have any way to pull fluoride out of a person, do we?
Well, there's some thinking that now, and this sort of makes intuitive sense, that if you eat a diet rich in bioavailable calcium, like in dark green leafy vegetables,
yes,
that it would help pull some of it out. But it's been this sort of sacred cow, this idea that fluorides are good and safe and mom's apple pie and all American, that kind of thing. And so up until recently, there really wasn't even research done in the United States except on oral effects of fluorides. So now that we've had some other things come out, we're going to be looking further into this. But right now, the places that fluoridate really around the world are those that have a strong dental lobby. And that tends to be UK and US influenced countries. China won't fluoridate. They know better. They've got and India won't fluoridate. They know better because they've got areas with some high naturally occurring fluoride in their wells. And so the people have paid the price for that. So the only issue is some of the areas that in China, they would say, oh, they're so high, the levels in their fluoride in their wells. But actually, if you start looking into it a little bit closer, you find out that some of the areas are not very much higher than some of our areas in the United States, especially when you consider the multiple sources of fluoride that we get that augment what we get in our water. So this is, when you see how the rest of the world has looked at this and dealt with it a lot more honestly than we have, you can tell that at some point here, as information is spreading, as the fluoride gate scandal unfolds, we're finding that people are they're getting really angry. I get phone calls from people who are white with anger that their baby has, for instance, a woman called me up and her two daughters had thyroid disease at a very young age, and she was trying to find out about this, and then suddenly she found out about fluorides, and she realized that the fluorides, they may not have caused it entirely, but they certainly didn't help it. They may have exacerbated it. And, I get people from a broad spectrum of groups who are calling now. And that's actually, your listeners who are listening to this. It takes the people who've been personally impacted by it to really have kind of a righteous pulpit, so to speak, to be able to speak to water utilities and to talk to lawyers and things like that. And so we encourage that.
Well, there have been areas where, they've stopped it. There's been progress because of, movements like yours where people are realizing it and, towns or something have actually quit using it.
Oh, very much so. And, there's a couple of different ways that water fluoridation gets rejected. One is communities that have been doing it for a period of time and then they just vote to get rid of it, stop doing it. And then there's those that have the opportunity to start it up, and the town gets educated about it and say, no way do we want this. And recently, for instance, Wichita, Kansas, there was these groups that were this was one of the largest areas in the United States that still had been unfluoridated, and they kind of got snuck up on by the pro-fluoride people, and suddenly this thing was thrust upon them. There was going to be a vote on Election Day, this in November here. And so they mobilized, and it was a group of people that just were very well-meaning. They educated themselves, and they didn't have a lot of time by the time this thing got introduced, and the other side had already kind of, if you will, quote-unquote, poisoned the minds of the leaders with this and tried to make them feel that fluorides were good and safe and needed. And but the final vote, I believe, was pretty substantially against it. They were vastly outspent by the pro-fluoridation side. I mean, humongously outspent. And they still wound up 60-40 rejecting it. And so Wichita and the surrounding areas won't have to deal with that right now. But the thing that is, I suppose, in Portland, there's a similar situation where the leaders of the city up there got snookered into believing this thing. And suddenly the other side had just, I think, about 30 days to collect signatures to make a referendum to overturn the city leaders' actions. And they did. I think they needed something like, 19 or 20,000 signatures. They got 40,000 plus. And maybe they needed 23,000. Anyway, they way surpassed it, but they did it all in less than a month.
Wow.
And so there's some really exciting things. And so now that Portland thing, there's going to be a referendum on overturning the city leaders' actions. I think it's in 2013 or 2014, but in the meantime, it has stalled the startup of fluoridation.
What's the actual purpose? Like you were just saying there that they're coming in, the pro-fluoride people are coming in and they want to make it so you have fluoride in your water. Why do they want to do that? Is it a financial gain thing? Or, I mean, what is their reasoning for coming in and saying, we want to give you fluoride all of a sudden?
Well, the dentists like to say that, we're losing money by fluoridating. All these cavities will be prevented, and they act like, it's a very sort of noble philanthropic thing that they do for society. But when it comes right down to it, most people don't know, for instance, that the fastest growing area of dentistry is cosmetic dentistry. And this speaks to the issue of dental fluorosis, which I think we talked about before.
Right.
Over the radio, it's hard without seeing photos of dental fluorosis to talk about it, but many people may know that they themselves or their family members have these kind of white or yellow or brown spots on typically your top, front, middle teeth, but it can be sort of the chewing edges of your middle teeth on the top and the bottom very commonly. And, they come from by the time you're, say, 8 or 10 years old, and then they last for the rest of your life. That what they call dental fluorosis, these spots on their teeth are a visible sort of outer biomarker of an inner fluoride overdose. The issue is, and we talked about this before, is that 40%, 41% or so of adolescents 12 to 15 now have some form of this on their teeth. And, the disturbing part, of course, is that since this is the hardest surface in your body, your tooth, what do we think the fluorides, if they cause this to the hardest surfaces, well, what are the impacts on your soft tissues, your brain and kidneys, thyroid, and things like this? But dentists, of course, are making money on this business of fixing these stains on people. But you ask a really good question. Why are they doing this? Well, I think realistically, and I don't have anything as a whole against dentists because I think dentists have a tough job. I think they really care. They're providing a service that, how'd you like to be in a job where people really try to stay away from your service because they have all these painful associations with it?
Exactly.
My wife worked in dentistry for 13 years, and she knew nothing. She was told nothing about harm from fluoride. So, and I found that most dentists basically know just the talking points that are given from the dental trade associations. And so, for instance, you're in Chicago, and Chicago is the home of the American Dental Association. I think that people need to really ask the ADA to get specific on certain questions, to answer some certain things because there's some questions about harm from fluoride that there's just no good answer to it, and if you answer truthfully. And so this issue about why do they fluoridate, I think most dentists, in good conscience, just trying to help people, they really believe fluorides prevent cavities. The
Right.
issue is they only prevent a small amount of cavities, and the way they do is through topical action primarily, meaning when it touches the teeth in your mouth, not when you swallow it, because that's how 50, 60 years ago when they started it up, they said, you got to swallow this stuff, and it will be incorporated into your tooth as it's forming under the gums and be cavity resistant. Now we found out around the year 99, 2000, guess what? The primary action is when it touches your teeth topically. So that voided the whole concept of putting it in drinking water. And so it should have ended it. But you ask yourself, why not? And that's the interesting part, one of the parts of the fluoride gate scandal.
They say it's probably financial is a big part of it, plus kind of the embarrassment or the fact that it's been going on for so many years and they've known that it's been bad and no one's ever done a thing about it. Government-wise is what I mean, not people like you.
Well, and that's the issue, is that there's a famous saying, Upton Sinclair. He said, I'm going to miss it by a couple words here, but he said, it's very difficult to get a person to believe something, to understand something, when his salary depends on him not understanding it.
Right.
And this is a thing to where I think what you mentioned about embarrassment and the legal liability issue, I mean, I think this is why people have a hard time being objective about it, because people have promoted it, they're afraid of being sued, and hey, the lawsuit, the legal action things are starting now. And it's starting with dental fluorosis, and my venture to say is that it's going to move into from dental fluorosis into the kidney harm angle, and then into the thyroid issue, maybe the bone harm issue also. But there's just so many. I talk to more and more attorneys these days. There's a phrase, I'm not an attorney, but they use this phrase, they call it a cause of action. Basically, it's sort of the rationale for the meat and guts of why you would sue somebody, and they call it a cause of action. And there's a whole series of causes of action relating to harm from fluorides. So as a risk management issue for a water utility, Illinois, where you are, for instance, you have statewide mandated fluoridation. That doesn't mean, though, from what I understand, just because you're required to fluoridate doesn't relieve you of your responsibility of informing people about all the parameters, maybe potential effects of what may happen. So, it's a interesting story as it unfolds, and I think that most dentists in good conscience were really just trying to help, but now they're in a pickle. And the question is the dental association going to defend them later if they're sued by their own patients? And I would rather suspect they won't.
Yeah, well, I remember growing up, when I grew up in Orland Park, a suburb of the Chicago area, and I remember we had fluoride in our water, a long time ago, and everyone said that this stuff's amazing, it's going to keep you from getting tooth decay, and, it's like this miracle substance. And I grew up that way, so our generation kind of grew up that way, too. So that's probably part of it, too, because we've kind of been brainwashed since we were kids.
Well, yes. I mean, we all, me included, we all thought that this was the panacea. Like I say, it was all American and mom's apple pie fluoride, And the thing is that, and this is a really important distinction to make, lack of fluoride does not cause cavities. Too many sugars on your teeth and lack of oral hygiene and dental care, that causes cavities.
Right.
So, there's no real biologic need for anything other than microscopic trace amounts of fluoride in our body. There's really no need for it, and you're not going to, there's just a lot of half-truths or outright falsehoods that are being spread about this chemical. And the thing that I find so fascinating as I watch this whole thing unfold is the first people that have figured this out are the private sector providers of fluoride. I think those, because they know that they don't have what they call sovereign immunity or immunity as a government agency from being sued. Mm-hmm. So they're the ones who, because they've already looked at the science and they're already starting to move away from fluoride. And to me, that ought to be very telling for all the legislators there in Chicago. I mean, if you've got groups like, I think it's super, for instance, that now Gerber is selling an unfluoridated bottled water so that parents won't use fluoridated city water to make baby formula.
I was just going to say that, too, because that's a statement right there. I mean, that hits you hard if you think about it.
Oh, it's a very telling statement. And there's we just got some other news today on how other people are starting to back away from selling fluoride in their products. And this, you ask yourself, why did the National Kidney Foundation withdraw their endorsement of water fluoridation, albeit quietly? Why did they do that? And why are there these unfluoridated toothpastes proliferating now? So the private sector folks who I think have more immediate sort of immediately discernible legal exposure. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be. But I do talk with a growing number of law firms. Absolutely fascinating now as they look at this and they say, wait a minute, there's a lot of science here. There really is harm that's happened here, and how come people didn't, the fluoride providers, have not told the susceptible groups at a minimum, let alone the general population? Why didn't they tell the susceptible groups like diabetics and kidney patients about harm from fluoride?
Has there been any big fluoride lawsuits yet, or any actually? But I mean, they don't have to be large. But I mean, is a class action suits or anything like that starting?
Well, the first one was filed, then withdrawn, and then refiled due to a technicality, but now it's been refiled. I think it was in September here. It was in the Federal District Court in Maryland on behalf of a young girl that has dental fluorosis. I think she has something like 10 to 12 teeth in her mouth that are going to need an awful lot of care. If she gets veneers on her teeth, and those don't last forever, I think they last maybe 10 to 15 years. Looks like, maybe her lifetime estimate of cost to fix her teeth might be in the range of $100,000. This is like a 14-year-old girl. And so there's a lawsuit been brought against Nestle Gerber and Dannon. Dannon used to sell this little water that on the front of it, a little bottle of water that said something to the effect of, for your children's dental health. Mm-hmm. And it had fluoride to it. And so, of course, now that she has this, and her parents thought they were doing the right thing, giving her this water for their daughter's health. And so that has been filed in Federal District Court in Maryland. So that ought to make everybody sit up, because there's so much science and literature behind this. There's no question that her stains were caused by fluoride. There's no question about that. So everyone's thinking to themselves, wow, what's the ramification of this? And to me, I think that people who are listening to this program, if you're concerned about your or your children's health, or maybe you have those stains on the teeth and don't know where they came from, or don't want to have to pay to get them fixed, I'm just encouraging people to find out, what the legal options are. I'm not a big person who believes in an awful lot of lawsuits, because, we don't want to have a whole boatload of lawsuits that are just not necessary. On the other hand, it's going to probably take, there's going to be quite a bit of lawsuits related to this in order to collapse it and to expose it, and then to get the help for the people that need it. And I understand that. I completely understand that. So I have a growing list of law firms now that are following this, and are diving into it, actually. They're looking for patients. So if there's anyone that's listening to this who is a kidney patient, for instance, and maybe you've been a long-term kidney patient, and nobody bothered to share with you that kidney patients are a susceptible subgroup, give me an email, send me a call. I can, give you a little bit more information, and maybe you do want to pursue legal action and, to get some help.
Do you want to describe again? I know you did last time you were on the show, but for people that don't know, describe what your teeth look like when they get this, so they know if perhaps they are getting it.
Well, sure. And I'm not a dentist. I'm not allowed to diagnose dental fluorosis, and I wouldn't want to. But I am working with some dentists who, if people would like to send me a photo of their or their child's teeth, send a couple photos, I'd be glad to run them past a dentist. But the dental fluorosis starts off typically as white kind of opacities, kind of chalky-looking white spots on those top front middle teeth, or maybe anywhere along the cutting or biting edges of the top or bottom front teeth. And you could have anywhere from 1 to 2 to 6 of them affected on the top, and similarly on the bottom. So then what you've got is these kind of, they're obvious, you can see them, and then they're white, and they don't reflect the light the same. Sometimes they kind of look like sort of chalky, but some are not quite as chalky. The weird thing is that depending on what your diet is, that these spots on their teeth have actually, the architecture of the tooth has been changed, so they tend to absorb staining based on what your diet is. So if you drink a lot of tea or other things like this, I guess what I'm trying to say is they only get darker over time. They never get whiter; they get darker. So some people may have started off with the white spots, and then they turned into brown spots. And some people, in the really severe cases, have actual pits, like golf divots in their teeth, like actual little holes in their teeth. And they're really severe if they were exposed to a lot of fluoride. So if anyone does have that, we at the Lillie Center, we're looking to find people like that. We photograph folks and we talk to them. We're doing some research related to that. So if anyone has that in their children's teeth, and disturbingly, in the black community and the Hispanic community, there's even disproportionately more of this dental fluorosis. So this is one of the things that we broke the story on nationally, that we felt that the Centers for Disease Control and others should have shared the fact that it's been known that minority populations have disproportionately more harm from fluorides. But even if you're in the Caucasian community, if you're a kidney patient or a diabetic, if you're someone who has a thyroid concern, or if you have those stains, we'd like to talk to you. That'd be wonderful.
That's interesting. And then you say probably the lower income areas where the people can't afford these water filters and all this stuff. These are the people that are getting hit by this the hardest right now, because even if they're aware of it, they have no way to stop it, right?
That, to me, is very compelling. Andrew Young, former UN ambassador, he talked about that when he issued a statement. He sent a letter to the Georgia legislature telling them he does not support water fluoridation, and he was concerned about folks from low-income families, and he says, what? He says, their babies don't count? Of course they do. He said, this is an issue of fairness and compassion and civil rights. So I think that's really one of the very disturbing aspects about this, is that a lot of people don't have the information that they should have, and those that do have the information may not be able to afford to avoid it. They go right to the sink to make their baby formula, and they use city water, or, when you're making your spaghetti, and you're boiling your pasta, people don't know generally that as you boil your water and it boils off, the fluoride concentrates in the remaining water in your pot.
Wow.
It's not like chlorine that boils off and you have less of it. And actually, as your water level drops, the fluoride level increases when you're boiling water. And so there's just, you're right in terms of buying a filtration system. If you are barely able to put food on your table, where are you going to get the money for these sometimes pretty expensive systems that take out fluoride? So, I think that there's a real issue of fairness here. And if I was a kidney patient, and, there's several kinds of kidney patients, someone who has a kidney stone or a kidney transplant or chronic kidney disease or maybe on dialysis, they filter out the fluoride at the dialysis center along with other things in the water. But then you go home and you ingest the fluoride from all these other sources. You can die from fluoride poisoning on a dialysis machine if they don't take the fluoride out of the water. And, this has happened, unfortunately, when the filtration systems are broken down. Unfortunately, that's a really, really rare occurrence. But, this issue, for instance, a lot of men, and women too, but let's say you have kidney stones. What is the first thing they tell you to do to prevent kidney stones? Drink a lot of water.
Correct.
Well, if the water you're drinking happens to be fluoridated, then the very water that you're drinking to prevent the stones can damage the tissue and your kidneys around the stones. So how much sense does that make? And this is why I think kidney patients really should speak out. And if they need legal representation, seek it out and look into this, because this is... kidney disease is really a concerning issue, because there's a lot of times there's virtually, in most cases, there's no warning signals. You're heading towards kidney disease.
Wow.
And so this is just important that people who are diabetics, for instance, find this out too. And that's because that...
I was going to say, a thought just came to me, Daniel, and people are trying to eat healthier nowadays. Not everybody, but a lot of people, they're into the health stuff, and so say they're doing their own organic garden in the backyard, their own vegetables, and they think they're doing great, but they live in the suburbs and they're watering this with fluoridated water. In fact, their vegetables have fluoride in them then, don't they?
Well, the uptake of fluoride, honestly, that's an area I haven't spent a lot of time on. I focus more on the personal health injection angle. But I know that some plants, like for instance tea, tea plants naturally accumulate fluorides from the soil. You can't tell me that if you're using fluoridated water to water your garden that you're lowering the amount of fluoride in your plants your vegetables that you're going to be eating.
Right.
There's a lot of, and of course, there's the environmental side of this thing that only 1% or less of all the water that's fluoridated goes into people's bodies that theoretically prevent cavities. The rest of it goes out onto our lawn, goes down the drain, through our laundry, through our shower drains, all that kind of thing. So on a basis of this is like the ultimate way to dispose of a waste product, because that's what the fluoride that we use is. It's a collected air pollutant emission that we use. But they collect this stuff, and essentially they dilute it through the public water supply, and then it goes out through everybody's drains. And so they're basically spreading a collected air pollution emission all over the world through our drains and, of course, into our bodies. So, when I used to work with hazardous waste, very hands-on, and we always said the solution to pollution is dilution. And we kind of said that sort of tongue-in-cheek. But that's really what's happening here is a very dangerous chemical is being diluted into the public water supply in our bodies and then just sent out into the environment, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Why don't you hit on that again real quick? Because if I remember right from the last time, you said fluoride is from a byproduct from the scrubbers and the smokestacks or something. Wasn't that it?
Yes. The way this thing unfolded, when we started to fluoridate, they began to use fluorides. They were talking a lot about sodium fluoride. But the practical aspect of it is, as it has unfolded, now, back in the 70s and 80s, we began to, when you manufacture certain kinds of phosphate fertilizers, they scrape this phosphorus ore out of the ground, and it comes contaminated with a number of things, one of which is fluorides, also certain radioactive things and arsenic and other things. But they decided that because it was going out through the smokestacks of these fertilizer factories and landing on the cows and crops all around, creating real problems, they put these scrubbers on the smokestacks, and so they would basically, as a scrubber is a way to use a water stream to basically collect the emissions, and they create this thing called a liquor, and it's got a sizable amount of fluoride in it, and so they would collect this stuff. It's called hydrofluorosilicic acid, or there's some other names for it, but then that's what was used, and the theory was, well, it'll be a win-win. We won't pollute the environment. We'll collect it. We'll drip it into the public water supply, and then people won't have as many cavities. But, of course, they didn't bother to tell people that this stuff is pretty nasty. It's an industrial grade. They call it they want to call it something other than what it is, so I think they call it a co-product, a fertilizer production. Let's just call it what it was until they put the scrubber on it. It was an air pollutant emission. Right. But in legal terms, if it has an economic value, it's no longer considered a waste. So they collect this chemical and they use it, and you can't dump it in international waters, can't put it in a lake, things like that. And if you spill it, it's a hazardous material. You have to transport it with all these placards all over the truck. But you can drip it into the public water supply, and suddenly it's a really great treatment, something good and safe. And, that doesn't make any sense to me. Now what has happened is much of that product is coming in from Mexico and China. Some of our capacity for producing in the U.S. has shifted. So we're getting a lot more of it from China and Mexico, and you can kind of draw your own conclusions about the safety and purity of all this stuff. So it's very sobering. It's not pharmaceutical-grade fluoride. It's not even reagent-grade fluoride like you use in a laboratory. This is industrial grade, meaning it's dirty and contaminated with all kinds of really bad actors.
Well, basically, when this is being dumped into your village water supply, it should be in a truck with a huge skull and crossbones on the side.
Well, it is dangerous, and I've worked with some pretty dangerous fluoride compounds, other ones, and this is, to me, there's so many things we could talk on this whole issue. There's a lot that could be said, but I mean, from the standpoint of the person listening to this, and you ask yourself, well, what do I do? How do we stop this? See, my perspective on this is, for instance, Wichita, 2 times previously, at least 2 times, the pro-fluoride people tried to introduce fluoridation, and it was rejected. And what did they do? They came back again, and they tried to do it. Now, this happens I get calls from people that they say, will you come talk to our city council, or will you come help us? We want to end fluoridation. And sometimes what will happen is an area will vote out fluoridation, but 3 years later, a new group of city council members come in and vote it back in. So our idea that we've worked at on the Lillie Center is that we want to kill this thing to sort of take the axe to the root of the tree, figuratively speaking, and that's the Centers for Disease Control, the world's foremost promoter of fluoridation. So we're working now through several different methods to expose this, to expose the Centers for Disease Control, and to bring into focus the Fluoride Gate scandal. And there's a real legacy opportunity here. When fluoridation ends, it's going to pay dividends for generations in people's health. And the other side says, oh, the cavities, the babies, the children, all these terrible things will happen to their mouth. Well, we need to deal with the causes, the true causes, which is lack of access to dentists. So many dentists won't even take Medicaid, and people don't have access to dentists in so many places. And interestingly, the dentists don't want to allow, the Dental Association is not enthused with something called dental therapists, which is a new kind of classification that's been tried in a couple of states, where some folks work in schools. They're not really dentists, but they have been given enough training to where they can maybe fill some cavities and do cleanings and things like this.
Right.
Very much cheaper. But the ADA has found a reason that they want to object to this. And you can, like I said before, you draw your own conclusions as to what they're trying to protect into doing that. But there is an opportunity here. That's why whenever I talk to folks in the media or people who call us up, I always say, who do you know? Who is it that you know that might be a person of means or a person who's well-connected, a lawyer or a philanthropist or someone who can get behind this? The pro-fluoride side has now gotten the Pew Charitable Trusts to fund their efforts to spread fluoride. They got deep pockets, and my opinion is they snookered the Pew folks into believing that this is, the thing to do to help people. But we're looking to find people who want to get involved, who are financially able to support it, or who have connections to well-connected people themselves, celebrities and key scientists and influential people.
Right.
So if someone who's listening to this is such a person or knows such a person, sort of take an inventory of who do I know that might be able to get involved in this, because the other side is outspending all of the really cool people, there's some great groups like the Fluoride Action Network and other groups that are working to end fluoridation, but we're being outspent by orders of magnitude, huge amounts. And, we have a nonprofit now, and we're looking to be funded, we look for gifts, but the issue is that if we don't sort of plan our work and work our plan, the other side is going to keep pushing fluoride like they just tried to do in Portland and Wichita. So, that's why I so appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk today.
Well, what can the average listener out there do? Someone that doesn't know anyone famous and might not have any money, but what can they do to help you?
Well, if you have dental fluorosis, or you think you do, you may not know, but if you have these funny spots in your teeth, they've been there since childhood, give me an email, and we can talk about it, or give me a phone call. And if you are a kidney patient, or if you're a diabetic, diabetics very often are really thirsty. So what do? They drink more fluoridated water. So that's why the National Research Council designated diabetics as a susceptible subgroup that's particularly vulnerable to harm. And if you're someone who has dental fluorosis, kidney disease, if you're a diabetic, maybe if you have thyroid concerns, give us a call or email us, or start talking to your water utilities specifically about this and educate yourself. That's really the most important thing to do, is to say things to your water utilities in a language that's meaningful and non-threatening to the water utility. Because most water utilities, they just want to do the right thing. They're just trying to give you good water. But like a lot of folks, they got snookered into believing in water fluoridation. And if you know anyone, if you want to talk to people, want to talk to their legislators and give them information. We had written a couple of articles on the Fluoride Gate scandal that are on our website. They're called The Questions of Fluoride Gate. and there's two of them. I'm working on a third one. That if people would like to read those and then forward them around to key influential people or their water utility, or their legislators, I think that would be great.
Why don't you give out all your information to your contact, whatever you want to do, your website and everything like that, so people can get in contact with you here?
Sure. Our website is www.powerandhealth.org. That's POWERANDHEALTH, just like it sounds, powerandhealth.org. And there's a link there you can click on to see some of our information on the fluoride gate scandal, and you can donate there and things like that. The articles that I just mentioned are there on our fluoride gate page, and people can forward those around to attorneys and whoever else. My email address, you can contact us through the website, but I'm going to also give you another email address, which works sometimes easier for me. It's stockin2@yahoo.com. That's my last name, Stockin, STOCKIN, and then the numeral 2, STOCKIN2, stockin2@yahoo.com. And my phone number's on the website there. If someone would like to give us a call, it's 706-669-0786, 706-669-0786.
Okay, well, that was great, Daniel. We're running low on time here. Is there anything else you wanted to say in closing, or are we all set here?
Well, I guess I would just say that it's right now, I'm a big believer in windows of opportunity. There's a window of opportunity now with all these other people that are bailing on fluoridation and certain great legal developments and other things, to where the house of cards that is water fluoridation is wobbling. And we can, through folks who will take some action steps right now, they can help protect themselves, their loved ones, and have a benefit, a legacy for a long period of time. So a lot of people, I think they vent, they write a letter to the editor, and that's about all they do. But really what we need is harmed individuals, kidney patients, diabetics, people with dental fluorosis. And we need connections to lawyers and doctors that get it, and politicians that get it, and celebrities that might be able to help endorse. So, and we need charitable contributions. So there's just a series of things that people can do. I think now they're going to have really a lasting benefit.
And they can donate on you're now a nonprofit. I know last time you said you weren't. So they can go to your website and donate, even if they only have a couple dollars or whatever they can afford. They can help you out now.
Yes, absolutely. We just, I haven't had a salary myself since 8.5 years. And, occasionally we've had people send us a little bit of money, and we've been super appreciative. But now we have a 501c3 organization where people can get a tax deduction for whatever amount they can donate, and we would so very much appreciate that.
That's great. Okay, Daniel, it was nice talking with you again, and as always, our door is open. Anything comes up or any new information, you're always welcome back.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll be back next Sunday with a brand new show right here on UFO-info.com. See you then.